Okay, welcome to episode 110 of an Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm excited to be speaking to Connor McKemey. At just 13 years old, Connor was burned over 90% of his body with third-degree burns and given less than 1% chance of survival after a backyard explosion. After 3 months in a medically induced coma, nearly 2 years of painful rehabilitation, and more than 100 surgeries over a decade, Connor emerged triumphantly, not only to walk again, but to live his best life. Despite his physical and emotional trauma, Connor went on to pursue his dreams of playing Division One lacrosse and then worked as a lacrosse coach for an elite program. His deep passion for sports and coaching youth inspired him to create the Mac mentality, his approach in navigating life confidently and authentically. Connor is now a motivational speaker and published author of the book Life Ignited, a hopeful journey sparked by fire. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you for having me, Piers. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what an amazing story. Wow, that's when I first read it a few months ago, it was like, wow, that's incredible. I'd love you to share, begin by just sharing some of your journey, please, Connor.
Yeah, of course. My background, growing up with two brothers in a small town kind of south of Charlotte, North Carolina, where, my life really just revolved around playing sports. Be- being outside, doing something athletic, and, coming from a family with, again, brothers and friends of all ages, uh, that was all we did, and I think for me, I always envisioned a life where I would be involved in athletics in one way, shape, or form. And even, as I started to approach middle school and seventh and eighth grade, getting into that teenage years, like that was all I wanted to do. And I was dedicated to playing those sports and hopefully achieving, high levels. And as I got into my eighth grade year, I hit, a little bit of a growth spurt. I started, finding my way a little bit in, football or American football. I played basketball as well, and then lacrosse. And, with those sports, like it was always nice having an older brother who pushed you and helped you compete against kids 2 3 years older than you. Only made me better. And so um, I think I would like to say my life was simple because it was like wake up, go to school, go to practice or a game, rinse and repeat. And
Mhm.
when you start doing that for a couple of years, we all know you fall into a little bit of a rhythm, and it's not like you're going through the motions, but you're not like it's just routine, right? And I would say I didn't have too many adverse moments or things that really weren't going my way at that time until the night of December 21st, 2008, where I was uh, putting forth a romantic gesture to this girl that I had liked, where we were gonna, cook some marshmallows, sit out by the stars, and enjoy a winter night out by a little fire. And something, making the fire is something we had done hundreds of times before with my brothers and my dad. And for this particular night, my dad was on his way back from serving in Iraq, so he'd been gone for about 8 9 months. And I this was like our last night before Christmas break, so I'm trying to get the fire started and impress this girl. And in my haste, there was an explosion that shot this fireball out at me, and I was instantly engulfed head to toe in just flame. And before I know it, I'm pushed to the ground and patted out. And when you open your eyes for the first time after that, I could just see like my skin charcoaled, my shirt completely gone. And you don't know how bad the situation is, but you could tell from the looks of everybody's faces that like this is not, you're not in a good place. And I remember as I'm getting wheeled away, just trying to remind everybody like I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be okay. I felt this sense of like, I have to let them know. Like I'm just, I've always been prideful and strong in that regard, but like there was something that allowed me to say, like, look at my parent, my mom, my brothers, everybody, and just say, I'm going to be okay. And the next thing I know, I'm in the back of an ambulance, the lights go out, and 3 months later, I wake up in a hospital bed in Augusta, Georgia.
Wow. Wow. 3 months. Were you in an induced coma during that
Mhm.
time, Connor?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. It was like a medically induced coma because I was burned 90% of my body, 75% being third degree. And so they want you to, first get through the first 48, 72 hours. But as they saw that things were going to be okay, it's really to help you not have to deal with the pain of the amount of surgeries. I think during those 3 months, it was basically every other day or every third day, some kind of procedures being done with the skin grafting and everything else. And so, again, I wake up in this happened in December. I wake up in February and I can just see, a completely different body. I lost a lot of weight. I was a different person. And I think that's a hard thing to come to grips with because, again, for me, it was like falling asleep and waking up in a new world and completely new circumstances. And especially at 13 and I turned 14 in the hospital, like you want to think your whole life is ahead of you, but you've now been told like, hey, it's completely different than how you ever envisioned it. And in a lot of ways, it was a starting over point for me. And I think if I didn't have that initial support system of a great set of parents, great friends and family, and like waking up to a hospital room that was full of cards and posters and pictures and everything else of all these people, like it showed me that I was fighting for something a lot bigger than myself. And at my darkest times, like I think I needed that more than anyone ever realized. And even at the time, I don't think you really understood the gravity of it. But when I saw like I got tons of people behind me, like this is going to get a lot easier because I'm not doing it alone. I got a support system and I got strength of all these people that are going to help me go step by step to figure this out.
Wow. What an incredible story. So 3 months, what happened then? So you wake up, what was then the process? And then,
I think early on it was first, understanding, okay, like what are the next steps to take? Okay, I'm being told, you're probably never going to play sports again. You're probably, going to be in a wheelchair or have some sort of assistance. And like that was honestly impossible to process, right? Like you're a teenager, you're a kid, you can't like, I'm like, no, no way that's going to be my reality. So I think being a teenager and being a little bit stubborn helped me be like, why not? And let me, try or try to prove myself wrong, by just actively, figuring it out. And again, I was blessed to have an amazing group of doctors and therapists that were willing to like allow me to attempt to do some of the things that I did. And um, I think early on, all I could think about was just trying to get a little bit better than I was the day before, right? Like momentum is an incredibly powerful thing, but if I could get the ball rolling by just trying to get a little bit better than where I was yesterday, I knew eventually I could get to where I wanted to go. Right. I wasn't at a place where it was like, hey, in 6 months or 8 months, like you're going to be back to normal. It was like, no, there is no normal now. This is your new normal. So you have to figure it out step by step. And so I was like, look, I have to adjust the way that I'm thinking about this. All right. I'm a new me and new version of me. So if we just get a little bit better each day, then I'll find that happiness, that person that I want to be down the road. I was like, don't put a time constraint on it because nobody it's never supposed it's not supposed to happen. So it's like, look, just start going day by day, step by step. And it literally started with standing, trying to stand, trying to bear weight on, 2 feet that were completely covered in scars and a body that went from being, a big athletic kid to I was about 6'1", 6'2", and now I'm 125 pounds. I'm a shell of who I was, and it was like, all right, we stood today. Tomorrow, let's try to take a step, and the next day take two, then four, and before I knew it, I was walking up and down the halls. I was walking around the facility, and then it was like, all right, let's get out of here. Let's get back to, school. Let's get back to, my reality of being at home. And in a lot of ways, the hospital shelters you, right? Because you're around similar people or people with, I mean, I was in a burn facility, so I'm surrounded by other burn patients and survivors. And going back to the real world, I think was eye opening, because then you realize how much you actually stand out, like how much you look different than the people, around you. And um, I went from just being like another patient to, you go into the grocery store or out in public and people are just staring at you and you don't feel different. You don't think you're not normal. I mean, I'm just like everybody else, but um, like you're already so self-conscious and, and worried as a teenager. And I think that just like was amplified tenfold. And um, again, having like friends that we could make jokes about it, like shelter me a little bit, but like show me that it's okay, right? Love me because of who I was and not because of what happened to me or the way that I looked. Like that helped me change that, you know, way that other people were looking at me and how I looked at myself. And I think those first few months of getting back to that normal, quote unquote normal life, like being out in public, going back to school, like all the things that everybody else did. Um, it was having that core group, that community around me that like shielded me from a lot of it, like allowed me to get back, essentially get back to where I wanted to go. And that was like the final big step for me. It was getting out of the hospital, getting adjusted back to life, and then, now let's go back to sports. Let's go back to the thing that we always loved. And lacrosse was something early on I felt like I could do. I could still hold a stick. I could still like pass and cradle and move around. It was just like physically, I had to get stronger. I had to get bigger. I had to get faster. And I worked with, some incredible trainers that took on this crazy project of working with a kid whose ambitions were probably way larger than they should have been. But they didn't let me shy away from it. And they took that same mentality of like, let's get better each day and, let's see where we go. And before we know it, like I'm back playing high school lacrosse. When I started my, freshman year of high school, like I'm back playing in that spring. So it hadn't even been a year out of the hospital and I was basically back to where I wanted to be.
And the prognosis from them was that from the hospital, what was their thoughts that would happen with you?
So with the way my skin grafts were being covered basically 60-70% of my body in this synthetically grown skin, it's not very thick. It's not like a traditional skin graft. Um, it's still your own skin that they grow, but it is very thin, and they weren't sure like how it would hold up, with running, with moving, with obviously contact sports, but just in general, they were like, we don't know how it's going to react. It was all fairly new at the time, and they allowed me to kind of be a, you could call it a test dummy in that way. But they were like, look, we'll patch you up, we'll see, but we want to know just as bad as anybody else does. But nobody's crazy enough to go test it out. But you seem to be willing, so let's see what it can do. And listen, I learned the hard way plenty of times what I needed to do to just like add another layer of protection, whether it's like long sleeve shirts or, you see compression pants and all sorts of things that they have now, right? Like to just cover your skin. For me, just an extra layer that was important. I learned to not kick a soccer ball barefoot because I broke my toe doing that, and something that I had done, my whole life growing up. Like we would run around the streets playing sports, barefoot. We never wore shoes. I didn't think anything of it, and now I learned. Now, so again, it came in waves, but each time, listen, they shook their heads, they laughed, but they put me back together. They patched Humpty Dumpty back up and let me go on my merry way. So because of that, I got to do some cool things, and I got to again try. to live the life that like I always wanted to. And I think that's like the most special gift they could ever given me.
Mm. It's a very inspiring story, Connor. Really appreciate, yeah, you sharing and coming back to something you shared a bit earlier is this idea of just showing up daily. I think I see this in my work, working with childhood trauma or people who've been to boarding school. I had challenging times. Is often we forget just to show up. I just could have, I mean, I had a breakdown in my 20s and I was suicidal, self-harming, and I worked out I just had to just show up today. I couldn't go any further forward because I didn't think I had a life. I couldn't go into the past because I was just reliving, really unpleasant memories. All I could do was just show up today. And that was hard enough. But I found that got me through because it's like, right, just go for a walk, do your work, and speak to your friends, and you'll get through. And but I'd love for you to speak a little bit about the importance of that just showing up, just right, I'll just see if I can stand today. What is the importance of that?
For me, like that was what kept me going, each and every day. Because as we all know, there's going to be plenty of times that are way harder than than others, right? I mean, life's when things are going great, life's a breeze, right? I mean, that's what everybody says. So it's very easy. But again, like I was doing all of these things while still struggling deeply with how I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting to a completely new body, adjusting to again this new life. And there was plenty of days where I hurt way more than I did the day before. I felt like I couldn't move, I couldn't walk, like I physically couldn't get further than I wanted to. um but I knew it's like this is only temporary, right? This feeling, this hurt, this pain, I mean, whether it is or isn't, like it's just having that belief, right, that this is temporary. And I've had plenty of good times, and I've had success, and I have great relationships, and I have people that are worth being there for. And we're 14, 15 years down the road. It's not like I don't have bad days or days where I'm like, hey, thinking about maybe I should have done something differently or whatever, right? But the reality is, um, you know, we're still ticking. For me, I think it's easy to have a perspective adjustment because, like, this has been technically bonus time, right? If you think about it, I mean, I was given a 1% chance of survival. So, I mean, even if it was 10, 15, 20, 50%, it's still bonus time, right? Like, it wasn't supposed to happen. And so on my worst days, it's like it could have been worse. And not just for me, but for all these people around me that like remind me life is worth living, remind me that, you know, again, these tough times or these trying times aren't permanent. Um, and for me now it's easy to look at where I was and where I am, and so the bad days today are not nearly as bad as they were 10, 10, 15 years ago. And when I am going through a rough patch, it's like kind of as you said, just be here. It's not necessarily like I don't look at it as just trying to get through the day, but it's like, look, it's another day. Anytime I wake up in the morning, no matter how bad yesterday was, it's like it's a fresh start. It could be a great day. It could still end terrible, but at least my initial thought, my initial first battle is not today's gonna stink. It's like today could be great. It could be. And just having that little mind shift change, like when you start your day or when you approach something, like I talk about it all the time, our perspective is everything. The way that we look at the situation is almost always going to dictate how the outcome is. So if I'm constantly, feeling negative towards it's the outcome, will more often than not feel negative, right? It's like as simple as a glass half full or half empty, right? It's like I'm trying to find the positives, and when you try to find the positives in life, they'll often find you.
Mhm. Perspective is everything. Yeah. Yeah, I so agree. I think it's one of my biggest struggles was I was such a pessimist, so down and hard on myself. I see this a lot with those I've worked with is we're really hard on ourselves. And I think when I've gone through difficult times, it's like I lost perspective, and having that perspective now to shift it around. And you mentioned as well, feeling is temporary. One of the sayings I used to have during my breakdown was, "This too will pass." When it was really difficult and I was lying there going, I just can't go on anymore. It's just like repeating, "This too will pass. This too will pass." And eventually it did. And so I really appreciate you saying that it's temporary. Something I come back to, as you mentioned in your recovery, is almost the importance of support. I really see that. You mentioned the words, "I had something to live for." I'd love you to talk a little bit about how important that is and how important that was on your journey.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I mean, my whole life, I feel like we've just been surrounded by, I'm very fortunate that way, but been surrounded by family, right? Cousins, brothers, friends that I would all call family, right? And we've always been one that we, take each other in and are there for each other on our best of days and on our worst of days. And so from the moment I woke up in the hospital, I had not just my parents, but I had aunts and uncles, I had grandparents, I had friends, not to mention all of the other cards and everything that I had. So it was like, look, like this is how much one person means to all of these people. And often we get caught up in our own silos in our own lives where we don't understand how greatly we impact those around us. Even though we don't necessarily have conversations with them every day, we might not even necessarily even know who they were. I had complete strangers that would email me or write letters or send notes that were just like, "Hey, we're thinking of you. We're proud of you. We see the, journey you're having like has impacted us," so on and so forth. And I think all of us know too many people that we've lost too soon. Um, so when I had an opportunity to have a second chance, I looked at it as like it's for all of these people that, when I had no control over the situation, were, sending their love, sending their thoughts, sending their prayers. And regardless of, what you believe in, it was just a power of people. And um, so, yeah, I think selfishly we want to have the life that we want, but the reality is our impact is so much greater than just our soul being. And um, having all of these people still to this day, like it's not, sometimes your circle gets bigger and smaller at the same time, but at the end of the day, it's like look around you at the people that you impact, and that's only going to be a small scale of it because it really is immense. And when I felt like I had nowhere to go and no strength left, it was like a random text or a call from somebody else, or whatever's going on that just like snaps you right out of it or brings you back to the reality and reminds you that again, like it's so much bigger than just us. And so I get to be in a very fortunate position where I speak and impact, the lives of others in a positive way, but it's all through stories and love of all these other people, right? It's like my experiences are what they are because of X, Y, and Z person. There wasn't anything I went through in this life that I did truly on my own. I might have relearned how to walk, but somebody taught me, somebody carried me, somebody was there holding me up when I couldn't move. It's like all these things. I feel like I get way too much credit when the reality is like the strength I have is because of everyone else.
Mm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. There's two things there. One is you mentioned the second chance, and I almost feel I've heard this recently, people talking about often we take everything for granted. And I love what you said. It's almost like a teaching piece there to go, let me see that today is a second chance and start again today. It's like whatever went on, I'm alive today. Let me take that second chance And that's really beautiful for me because I think we do take it for granted that we have 206, 208 bones in our body. They're all healthy, all 500 muscles. They're all healthy. It's like we just take all of this thing, as granted. But when it's taken away, suddenly it's like, oh, but isn't it wiser for us to appreciate it now?
Mhm.
The other question which kind of comes up is I see that myself and many of the people I've worked with, they don't have that community generally because they've learnt through the trauma, through the separating from family, to do everything on their own. They become an island unto themselves. What would you advise? What would you say to someone who doesn't have that community or that support network around them? What could they do?
Well, I think again, I stress a lot on the power of the community, but I will say as individuals, our greatest asset and our greatest strength or strengths are our mind and our heart, right? It's like we have the ability internally to again change the conversations we have with ourselves, which can make a huge difference in how we approach life, right? And then with a heart, that's where I believe our belief, in that belief system is, regardless of where your faith is or anything else. It's like knowing that my heart is still beating today, as we touched on earlier. Like I have a chance to change what's going on in front of me. And I think human beings in general, we've seen over time hundreds of thousands, if not millions of stories, right, of people overcoming way worse odds than I had ever experienced and doing far greater things. So human beings have shown through the test of their entirety that they are resilient in nature and have the ability to do incredible incredible things. And so when you have that belief in the beat that's going on and you change the conversations that you have internally with your mind, then you can start to, approaching life in a completely different way, right? And so a human being, a single person can do that. I think it helps when you do those things and then when you feel a little lapse in strength or whatever, that's when I mean, I'm a person that like, again, I get strength from those around me. That's who I am. But internally, I know if I still want to get to the end result that I want, I have to do that. That's the actions I have to take. I have to have that belief internally, and I have to have those conversations in my mind that allow me to approach it in an optimistic way or an educated way or a way that's going to allow me to again find the success that I'm looking for. So I think, even as an island, we can be successful by just using our greatest tools. And that's where like my whole approach has been with Mac mentality, my speaking, and everything that I try to preach on is the our abilities as human beings individually to use these strengths, these core values for our betterment, right? And again, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to rely on people, but relying again on our inner strengths.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Thank you. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that mentality. How do we start to develop? And then we'll go into the heart, developing the heart, but beginning with the mental. Say kind of come, we've got this really negative internal dialogue, the inner critic, like I used to have, and I know so many do have that. What do you teach others about developing that inner strength, that mental strength?
So I mean, for me, this would be it's kind of a perfect segue to, I mean, what my whole message and company is, right? It's called the Mac mentality. It's the three pillars of what I feel are all things that we can control. Because a big focus of what my conversation is controlling the controllables, right? Control the things in our lives that we can take ownership of, because there's a lot of chaos out of there. There's a lot of things that are well out of our hands, right? But the MAC for me is motivation, right? Which is our drive. It's the driving force behind human action. That's kind of the little definition I use, but it's that drive inside of us. It could be good, it could be bad, but we're driven to eat junk food at times. We're driven to work out. We're driven, there's different drives for us. But it's to understand that there is a drive, there is a motor behind. The A is for attitude, right? Which is our feeling or opinion about something, or whatever. That's again in its simplest terms. And then the C is courage, which to me is the most important of the three, because as I touched on, as we all know, there's so many things out of our control that we need to have courage to you know combat that fear, that anxiety, those things that, again, as somebody who likes to control things, when you can't, that gives you anxiety, that gives you fear, that gives you frustration. But you have to have the courage to rely on your core values, your strength, your abilities. And so that's why they all work together really well. And that's where my mentality was set up from, right? I was like, what helped me the most when I was struggling through, not, my hard times in the hospital, my hard times with coming to grips with the way that I looked, all these things. And I was like, it took motivation, it took an attitude adjustment, and it took courage, because I never knew what the end goal was going to be. I had to just keep pushing forward, right? And eventually you may get there or you may not, or it could turn out completely different than how you envisioned. But you have to have that courage to take that leap, to take that next step, to keep going in that uncertainty. And so that was where that mentality came from. And so when I speak and I, try to touch on those core aspects, it's all three things that we can control. We can control where our driving force is, we can control where our attitude is, and we can control how to be courageous. And that was where I was like, look, this is the mentality that it helped me, and I've seen in so many other people. It's not just me, but it's like you see it in successful people, you see it in people that overcome adversity, and people who struggle with so many different things. Like, these are some of the similarities between all of them. It's a motivational aspect, it's an attitude aspect, and it's being courageous.
Love you to give an example of how to use that motivation, attitude, courage. If you've got someone who maybe is, I don't know, they're struggling mentally, they're depressed, or they're struggling with an addiction. How could we use that? What would you guide someone to do in an example?
Okay, so for something like that, I would say, I could use it as, I mean, in a lot of ways. When I was in the hospital, they put you on heavy, opioids and very addictive, painkillers. And so I had to look at, okay, if I wanted to get back to the real world, I couldn't be, taking morphine at 13, 14 years old. That's very, not going to be good for you. So there had to be a driving force, right? What did I want some semblance of an end goal to look like? Because I knew going down this path, or if you're struggling with addiction, the end result. We've seen it too many times, far too many times, right? Unfortunately. So there's our driving force. So then it goes into our attitude. Well, what do we want, or how are we picturing this outcome to be? We know if we keep falling back into the same habits because it's easy, it makes me feel better, and it can get me past this temporary pain, I'm never going to get to the other side. And where the courage lies is you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know how difficult the journey is going to, you can't fathom the pain, that you're going to have to endure or struggle through. But if you take that leap of faith with that courage, if your attitude is to just keep going, keep going, keep going, and you have that driving force, that motivation that tells you, like, if you can get through this, where that, what's on the other side of sobriety, of beating the addiction, of beating, that pain. And it's like, but it doesn't work without, again, with each, it's not even like I don't call it a 3-step process. It's like, it's all back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, right? It's like, you have to be courageous throughout that journey. You have to, on your worst of days, still have that motivation to just get up and keep going and keep going, get through it, get through it, get through it. And that attitude of like, I know I can, I know I can, I know I can. And, that's where, to me, like, that was the stuff that I don't talk about the most, which was the most difficult part. One of the most difficult parts of my journey in the hospital was like getting through being on 3 months of, extreme pain medicine, and having to go through withdrawals, having to go through, all of that pain, all of that suffering, just knowing that, like, if I can get through this, then what's stopping me going forward, right? Like, this is about as bad as it can get. So I know, I was like, that was where that attitude was, the belief, right? That it's like, if you get through this, like, there won't be anything stopping. You can keep going.
Beautiful. I really like that. Makes a lot of sense. Developing our hearts, Connor. How, talked about developing our minds. What about our hearts? How do we develop that? I mean, what I see again in the audience who'll be listening to this will be a lot of us have shut our hearts down because we were, sent off to these institutions age 7, 8. We learn to disconnect, dissociate from our emotions and our hearts. I mean, so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how we develop the hearts, how we bring, whether that's emotional intelligence in, but yeah, what can you share?
So for my experiences, I think it was very difficult early on. Again, find even just love for my own self,
Mhm.
with what happened to me. And as I touched on a little bit ago, like, I spent the good portion of a year, not basically trying to avoid mirrors, reflections, anything. And there's plenty of people that struggle with that still. And I think what allowed me to start finding that love for myself was opening my, like, allowing myself to open up to others. And it wasn't just like talking about my experiences. It was just like seeing people being friendly to me, not because of they felt sorry or anything else. Like, you could tell, like, genuine, friendship there. There was people that obviously were still friends with me before, and were always going to love me regardless. But um, I think it took me a long time to come to grips with, like, somebody could actually love me, and that was because of myself, right? Like, I had to allow myself to see myself in the mirror and see myself as somebody who is worthy of that love. And um, what I tried to learn, or what I took from that experience, was, like, I was so often we're so critical of somebody who's hurt, who's damaged, who's not the best versions of themselves. And they may as well want to be, but, like, we're being critical of a person that isn't whole, isn't, again, the version that, for, you and I we would consider our best selves. And so why am I trying to pile on and tear that person down more, instead of being like, all right, well, let's see where the issue is. Let's see where the heart of that matter is. And for me, it was like, I was so caught up in the way that I used to look like, or that I had these scars, or that I was this, or that I was that. And it was like, dude, you're still healing. Like, you went through something incredibly traumatic, and you're still healing. So you have to give yourself time. And there wasn't like a day or a date that it just snapped. And it was like, okay, because I don't think it comes that way. It was like, gradually I could be in the mirror a little bit longer. I could, see myself physically healing, but emotionally, like, healing at the same time. And when I gave myself that time and that grace, it came back. And then you really started to understand, all right, like, this is who I am. It's, and be proud. And I was proud of like what I was able to get back to and what I went through. And like, yeah, these scars are a reminder of a traumatic incident, but they're also a reminder of like the blood, sweat, and tears that were spent to allow me to walk, allow me to run, allow me to do the things that I do today. And so they're not something to be ashamed of. Like it's part of my identity, and if, in many ways it's part of my superpower. So like the heart grew because I had to give it time. And one day there was a moment where it was like, all right, like I stood in front of the mirror a little bit longer. I brushed my hair out. I got dressed, and I'm like, I felt that like confidence again, that joy again, and like that was internally, because you could be out with friends or family and laughing and have a good time, and nobody would ever know what's going on between your ears or in your heart. But like I just, again, I think way often we're way too critical of somebody who's healing, and when we allow ourselves to heal, or we go through the proper pathways to heal, whether it's therapy, whether it's, whatever, we all have our own different paths, but you have to give yourself that grace period, and you'll see, like, again, I always look back on, if I wasn't meant to be here, I wouldn't be here. So the fact that I'm here, like, is worth something. And I might not necessarily loved myself from day one, or loved that I was here from day one, but 15 years later, it's like that I'm incredibly blessed that I am, because and tomorrow when I wake up, or today when I wake up, and every day, it's like, just, like, even if you're struggling with, what's going on in your life or the way you view yourself, it's like I'm here. And so if I'm a big believer that if I'm still here, there's a reason for it. And I know not everybody feels that way, but like, again, people go all the time in millions of different ways. So like, again, just instead of wishing or waiting, it's like, just be thankful because we're here. And it might not be the easiest, but you have a chance, you have an opportunity, and I think that's all we can ever ask for.
Mhm. Yeah, being thankful, that gratitude. I come back to that so much. I know Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that. Robert Enemans has done a lot of research about the importance of gratitude, of what we do have. It kind of comes back for me, almost that second chance. It's like, oh yeah, let me be grateful now for what I do have in this moment. I really loved what you said, something along the lines of our wound is part of our superpower. It's like, yeah, if because I can often see it myself and others, is we can get lost in that victim in the wound, and we can almost give up. We get stuck in that victim's mindset. If we can move out and actually see that the wound is a superpower because we can serve others. We've been through something. Yes, we've got to grieve, which is part of this bit, but it's almost like Joseph Campbell and his work, The Hero's Journey. We kind of start the hero's journey and then we go into the darkness. And in the King Arthur's legends, they said the knight had to choose the forest at the darkest point. So you've got to go into the place which is darkest to you, which scares you most. But then we've got to come out, and we've got to come out with that boon. What is the gift? What have we learned? And I think when we do that, it becomes our superpower. It's like, so for me, my boarding school trauma, that's what a lot of the podcasts are about. It's like sharing what I went through: sexual abuse, a friend committing suicide, me trying to commit suicide. Then I'm kind of passionate about letting others know, well, this is not just me. There are thousands, tens of thousands. And, a lot of the leaders globally have been to these institutions where similar things happen to them. And so it's like how we can turn that around. So, and it kind of, and I love what you say about the mentality there. I think it's Alden Mills who wrote Unstoppable Mindset or Unstoppable Mind. And he says, he's a retired Navy SEAL. And he says, it's really important to talk kindly to ourselves. And most of us think, oh, SEALs, they would have been really hard on themselves, giving them shit. And it's like, no, you want to be kind. And I see most of us, just myself included, I used to call myself horrible names. You're a piece of shit. And that didn't help me. And I'm hearing you say that we've got to change that around. Yeah, fascinating. So, I mean, what else did I kind of, is there anything else about emotional health? Maybe, you mentioned working with teenagers. A lot of the teenagers I see, I mean, I worked as a scout leader for a number of years. And I see a lot of them are really struggling. And is there anything you could share or, about their mental, emotional health? What advice would you give them?
Oh, of course. I think again, what makes my experience unique slash relatable for a lot of them is like it was all a growing up experience, right? Like I think because of what I went through, it gave me just a unique lens, or you could even call it a microscope on like everything that was going on, right? It was like everything was super zoomed in because it was it was just it was a big deal, right? It was like I was able to look at how people interacted with me, I knew I stood out. I knew I looked different and all that, but it was like I still had friends. I still went through life. I did all the things, in high school that was typical normal. Went off to college, did those things, and but I had a unique experience during that time where it's like I'm talking about these traumas. I'm approaching these things, and I think where we grew up in a little unique time is like social media was starting to explode, but it wasn't where it is at this stage by any means. And so I think in a lot of ways, like I understood the importance of that being just a snapshot of our reality, right? So often we get caught up in what people see and this is what I stress to the today's generation is like we get caught up on what we see people posting online, you know, the pictures they post, the messages, the stories, whatever it is, and it's at the end of the day, it's still only a snapshot of the reality. And um, for me, it was like, all right, well, what were the experiences that were truly meaningful when I was when I was in high school, or what made the difference? And that's where it was like having that belief and that core and that drive, right? That initial, like, what did I want? All right. High school is not, and in the same way I viewed college, it was like, there's the saying, that college is the best 4 years of your life, blah, blah, blah. That's what they preach in America. And I'm like, I don't want the best years of my life to be 18 to 22. Like what, so for the next 60, 70, 80 years, like it's all downhill from there. Like that's not the life that I want to be a part of. And so like that's the message that, I try to, convey to others. It's like, look, these are all building blocks. All right. And if our mindset is, you know, you take the good and the bad, and it's all part of what's going to help build me to where I want to go. And you learn from your mistakes, you learn from your setbacks, you learn, how to deal with that adversity in those difficult times, knowing that, look, when I get through the other side, it's another piece of armor. It's another piece of something that's going to make me stronger for the next challenge, the next difficult thing. Because look, we all, it's hard to understand at that age, but life is not like an up and a down, or a straight line. It is a tons of hills and valleys and many different, winding roads. Okay, because it is anything but straight. And so, it's like, look, you got just the mindset that we have to start approaching it is like it's all, you know, it's building blocks. It's like my tough times are stepping stones to better times, and I think it gets so blown out of proportion at the young age now, again, because you see X, Y, you see people posting things or doing things, and you can get caught up in like I mean, we even get caught up in it now. I'm at the point in time where it's like there's a huge portion of my friends that are getting married or having kids or other things. You got other kids that, other people that aren't, and everybody's in between. And you can get really caught up in like where I am at my point in life. But we're all on our own unique paths. It's like you can't compare yourself to others. No matter how similar your experiences may be, you guys are completely different people. And I'm a big believer in you have to find that beat to your own drum and you have to follow it. And when you do that and you take the good and you take the bad and you take it in stride and you just try to go day by day by day. And as we touched on earlier, showing up, when it's tough and showing up when you don't want to get through it, you'll see that the ultimate goal, the end result, is going to be a lot better than you probably could ever imagine. And that all comes with like just having a little belief. And when you have that, who knows? It might take you 5 years, it might take you 10 years, it might take you 100. But if you keep having belief that like the better days are ahead of you, then who knows, man? I think that's a pretty nice way to live.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that individual thing you've said, and you mentioned about half an hour ago about core values. How important do you feel that is for young people to really come back and ask that question, well, who am I? What's important to me? Because I often see is we live in a society, like you said, social media, I've got to get there, got to get to that point. But often we sabotage or um, we don't connect to our core values. So we get there and we feel really empty because we've become brutal or we've become unkind. Want me to talk a little bit about the importance of those core values, those inner strengths, and finding out what they are for ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in what somebody else is doing or the path that they're on. But it is like incredibly important to find that. Uh, again, for me, I've always dreamed of again playing sports, coaching sports, and like that was all I wanted to do. And I got to that point, and in a lot of ways was exactly where I wanted to be, where I ever dreamed I could be. And it was never that I felt empty, but there was a big sense of like, is there not more I could be doing? Or I didn't feel like, maybe my gifts or my abilities were being used to the best of what they could be. And that was really where I had a shift. And it took, COVID in 2020, which pulled most of us out of where, our normal routines, to pull me out of mine, right? Which was waking up, going to work, doing my job, coming home, rinse and repeat. Um, to look and say, like, this is going to really affect a lot of people. And there's going to be a lot of people out there, my age, younger, and going forward that are going to have to come to grips with, like, the world we know is a lot different than what we thought it was. And it was a big wake up call in a lot of ways. And it was people spending time, not in routine, not in their comfort spaces, not doing the things that like were easy or helped kind of pass the time, right? And it did make a lot of people internalize, like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? Um, and for me, I've always felt like if I didn't have that you could call it like butterflies in your stomach or whatever, like nervous anxiety, with what I do, with speaking, with like hopping on calls or doing what talking, like, then I feel like I didn't, it was the same feeling I got when I was coaching. It was the same feeling I got when I was playing sports. It's like it helps me honestly center where I am and be like, it means something to me. Like, if I didn't feel an emotional attachment to anything that I'm doing, it's just, I'm like, what's the point? Like, and I think that's where we can look at, there's, two paths. It's like, do you want to do a job that covers the things that you love to do? If you play sports or you golf or go on trips or whatever, right? And you work, so you do those fun things, and that's what brings you joy in life, then that's like more than fine and happy. And if that gives you, security and all the things that you want, like, I think that's wonderful. I was just like, I was wired where it was like, I want to do something that, brings me like is, different, right? Like brings me my own joy, but allows me to also like touch the lives of others in a positive way. It's unique, what we do. I mean, what you get to do too. It's incredible, right? You get to impact people in a positive way that like I've always been a believer. It's like a domino effect. You know that, having a positive impact on this person, like in their turnaround is going to impact the people around them and so on and so forth. It's unique and it's cool. And you can put a monetary value on that. And so I think those are like my two schools of thought. I think it's like you have the ability with social media and so many other ways to influence people in a positive way. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of negative stuff that goes on in social media and way too much, hate and vitriol and tearing people down. But that's easy for people to hide behind, keyboards and anonymous anonymity. And I get that. But on the other hand, you have the ability to impact people in a positive way and in a productive way. And again, I just would love to see a world where more people are trying to lift each other up than constantly tearing each other down. And if that's a message I get to help spread, like that's what I want to do, and I want to, hopefully inspire others to do the same. Because as I touched on many times here, it's life is way easier when we're lifting, like I said, there for each other and lifting each other up than when you constantly have to feel like you're fighting this battle alone.
Mhm. Yeah, brilliant. I love what you said at the beginning of the conversation about how a message from someone just giving you support kind of helped you get through the day. And it's kind of lifting people up. If we can do that through social media or through texting a friend or a loved one, I think I see that. I was reading Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, over the weekend, and saying the importance, a lot of businesses is all about taking. And he says actually businesses need to be moving into a place where they serve, first of all, the people who work for them, and then serving everyone outside that. And I see that's like the shift, the quantum shift, that we've got to move from almost the immature, the boy or the girl, which is all about me, which I feel where we're at in society a lot. It's like, look at me, or what can I get? Moving to the sovereign, the man, the woman who's about service. Right, this is needed. I need to do this. I need to be there and serve the people who are in my company, serve the global, you know, and be more aware, say on social media, okay, I'm angry. Let me not write that post. Let me not write that message. How's that going to impact someone? And also if it's a beautiful message, let me write that. So
Exactly.
I can really resonate with that. So
I said exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's very, again, it's very easy to hide behind that keyboard and be negative and tear people down. But I mean, I think 100% it's way more beautiful to lift each other up and try to spread that.
Mhm. So as we start to wrap this conversation up, are there any final bits that you'd love to share with my audience, that you'd like to inspire people? Any final thoughts? That would be.
I mean, if to anybody that's listening, and anywhere I go, I try to leave with the same message, and it's like been a little bit of a catchphrase. I obviously with the name of the book, Life Ignited, I lean into the fire stuff a little bit, but it's something I sign and it's something I always say, and it's this phrase "stay lit," and it's just a reminder to everybody to just keep that flame internally going. Right. If it all is tied into what we've already touched on today, showing up, just being there, waking up, and having that opportunity, like by just saying "stay lit." it's just a reminder to keep that flame on, right? Keep going, and sometimes we're going to feel like a little match or a candle, and the wind's gusting and we're getting really close to being blown out. But if we can just somehow keep that fire lit inside of us and keep going, uh, that match has the ability to spark a fire, right? And that thing can do uh, amazing things. And so yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's like a little quick saying, but it's just stay lit, stay lit. Reminder.
Mm. Stay lit. How do people find out more about your work? What's the best place for people to buy your book or reach out?
Yeah, so my website is macmentality.com. You can follow me on social media like Instagram, Facebook at Mac Mentality or Connor McKemey. I mean, both those pages are pretty linked. And I mean, we speak to businesses and groups all over the world. Obviously, I have the book Life Ignited, which has been awesome. We're just a little over a year out from when that released, and it's been fun just sharing the journey. And I think through the website or Instagram or any of those, like we have forms and things that you can fill out to reach out. And we also have any other work that I've done, podcast clips, TV, whatever, it'll all be on there. This will be on there, so you can listen to it there as well. But yeah, macmentality.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. You're a real inspiration, Connor. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you today, and yeah, I've learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Piers.
Okay. Blessings. Take care.